Imagine walking out of your house, stepping onto a busy street, and suddenly losing complete control of your body. You are fully conscious, utterly terrified, screaming for help, but your limbs are running a rogue program that your brain cannot shut down. You are forced to dance. In July of 1518, a woman named Frau Trophea stepped into a narrow, unpaved street in Strasbourg, France, and began to move. There was no music, there was no alcohol, just a solitary woman engaged in an intense, silent dance in the dirt. Her neighbors initially watched in confusion and thought it was pretty funny, assuming it was a passing moment of odd behavior. But then the sun went down, and Frau Trophea kept going. The next morning, the sun came up, and she was still at it. Her clothes were soaked in sweat. Her feet left bloody footprints on the cobblestones, and her face showed signs of intense physical exhaustion. She would occasionally collapse to the ground from sheer fatigue, only to get back onto her feet a few minutes later and resume the frantic motions. This was not a quick little celebratory jig. This went on for 6 straight days. But a solo act is just a bizarre anomaly. What happened next turned Strasbourg into the stage for a baffling crisis. Within a week, over 30 more citizens walked out of their homes, looked at Frau Trophea, and immediately joined her. By August, the number had reportedly ballooned to around 400 people. Men, women, and children who had absolutely no desire to dance were suddenly locked into an agonizing marathon. They simply could not stop. Many danced for days on end, pushing themselves past the absolute limits of human endurance. And the most incredible part of this entire tragedy? When the authorities sat down to solve this medical emergency, their official, legal solution was to build the victims a giant stage, clear out the town square, and bring in musicians. Today we are diving deep into the thoroughly surreal and deeply disturbing true story of the day. A medieval city danced its way into a historic crisis. We'll uncover how the local government essentially hosted a public festival to cure a disease, and explore the mind-bending psychological mystery that actually caused it. To understand how a massive group of human beings could collectively experience this, we have to look at the setting. We need to understand the environment of Strasbourg in the summer of 1518. The city was a bustling, cramped medieval hub under the Holy Roman Empire, but 1518 specifically was a masterpiece of human misery. The region was suffering from catastrophic crop failures, pushing food prices so high that many families were left entirely destitute. On top of the famine, the population was being ravaged by historic diseases like smallpox and leprosy, alongside a devastating outbreak of syphilis. The psychological tension in Strasbourg was stretched to its absolute limit. The average peasant was living in a constant state of chronic stress and trauma, deeply fearful of the future. Enter the medieval medical community. When Frau Trophea and the early dancers began taking over the streets, the local magistrates panicked. They called in the city's top medical minds, doctors who had spent years studying ancient texts. The doctors examined the dancers, who were moving frantically in the heat, and declared that this was not a spiritual curse. Instead, they proudly announced that this was a natural illness caused by a chemical imbalance in the body. Specifically, they blamed a condition called hot blood. According to the medical science of the day, human health was dictated by 4 liquids called humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. The doctors argued that the dancers' blood had somehow overheated, forcing their limbs into involuntary motion. So how do you cure a group of people whose blood is supposedly boiling with kinetic energy? Modern logic would suggest rest, isolation, or hydration, but medieval logic worked differently. The doctors reasoned that the dancers simply needed to burn the heat out of their systems. The medical directive was simple: do not let them stop. Keep them moving until they are cured. If you enjoy diving into the stranger corners of human history and want to see how these bizarre mysteries unfolded, take a moment to hit that subscribe button. We unpack stories like this every week, and having you along for the ride helps us keep uncovering the secrets the textbooks left out. Once the city officials had the official medical recommendation, they went completely overboard implementing the cure. The magistrates of Strasbourg decided that if these people needed to dance to survive, the city was going to facilitate it on a massive scale. They officially banned other forms of public gathering to keep municipal focus entirely on the crisis. Then, they cleared out 2 massive public spaces, the grain market and the horse market. They hired carpenters to construct large wooden stages in the center of the plazas to give the dancers more room. But they didn't stop there. The government realized that dancing in complete silence is difficult to maintain. If these peasants were going to successfully burn off their hot blood, they needed a rhythm. So using public funds, the city hired professional musicians, including drummers and pipers. They also hired local laborers to act as handlers. Their entire job was to stand on the stages, catch the collapsing, half-dead peasants, and physically keep them upright so they could continue moving. Picture this scene. It is the middle of summer. There are dozens of people on a giant wooden stage, their eyes wide, dancing violently to the frantic banging of drums and the wailing of flutes. It wasn't a medical treatment. The city had accidentally engineered a public spectacle. Predictably, the plan backfired. Some historians believe that the spectacle itself may have encouraged additional cases among an already vulnerable population. Healthy citizens who walked down to the market saw the crowds, heard the hypnotic rhythm, felt the overwhelming frenzied energy, and were swept up in the collective panic. Within days, the crowd grew larger, and then the physical toll became catastrophic. Some contemporary accounts claimed that at its absolute peak, as many as 15 people died each day from heart failure or heat stroke, although modern historians debate the exact numbers. The human body simply has hard limits, and performing high-intensity movement for days on end without proper food or water proved fatal for many. The true number of deaths remains unknown, but the marketplace had transformed from a place of commerce into a scene of absolute devastation. By late August, the local government finally realized that their musical approach was a failure. The marketplaces were filled with exhausted citizens, and the bizarre phenomenon was still a threat. The magistrates dismissed the doctors, silenced the instruments, and tore down the wooden stages. They concluded that medicine had failed them. It was time to try religion. The authorities concluded that if this wasn't a physical ailment, it had to be a spiritual trial. Specifically, they pointed their fingers at Saint Vitus. In medieval Catholic folklore, Saint Vitus was a Christian martyr. Over centuries of oral tradition, a belief had formed among European peasants that if you angered Saint Vitus, he could punish you by sending a plague that forced you to dance uncontrollably. The city shifted its strategy from public stages to a forced religious pilgrimage. They rounded up the surviving dancers, secured them safely in large wooden carts to prevent them from injuring themselves, and traveled toward a shrine dedicated to Saint Vitus, located in a cave in the nearby hills of Saverne. When the carts arrived, the priests went to work. They placed small religious imagery in the palms of the dancers' hands and sprinkled holy water over them. They led them in slow, deliberate circles around an altar painted with the saint's image. And then something happened that nobody expected. The dancers started getting better. Contemporary accounts suggest that after spending time at the shrine, many sufferers gradually recovered. Whether it was faith, ritual, rest, or simply the passage of time, the outbreak appears to have subsided by September, allowing Strasbourg to slowly return to normal. So what actually happened here? How do we explain this today? For centuries, historians and scientists have argued over the true cause of the dancing plague of 1518. For a long time, the most popular theory was a chemical culprit called ergot poisoning. Ergot is a toxic fungus that grows on damp rye grain, which happens to be exactly what the poor people of Strasbourg were eating during the famine. Ergot contains compounds that can cause severe hallucinations and intense muscle spasms. It sounds like the perfect explanation. The peasants ate bad bread and lost control. Except, modern historians have pointed out a massive flaw in the ergot theory. Ergot poisoning also drastically cuts off blood circulation to the limbs, causing severe gangrene. If the citizens of Strasbourg had been suffering from ergot poisoning, they wouldn't have been physically capable of high-energy movement for days on end. They wouldn't have been able to stand. If it wasn't the food, what was it? Modern psychologists and medical historians have reached a much more compelling conclusion. The dancing plague of 1518 was a profound case of mass psychogenic illness, commonly known as mass hysteria. This is a documented psychological phenomenon where extreme emotional stress and collective trauma physically manifest as real bodily symptoms. Remember the environment of Strasbourg: severe starvation, absolute poverty, constant disease, and a deeply ingrained belief that a supernatural force could curse you. One possibility is that Frau Trophia experienced a severe psychological crisis due to stress, and her mind manifested that trauma as an involuntary physical action. Because the rest of the population was living under the exact same level of extreme pressure and shared the exact same fears, her breakdown triggered a domino effect. Their minds essentially mirrored the behavior. It was an involuntary physical release for an entire community that was collectively drowning in despair. When the city government built the stages and hired the musicians, they didn't cure the illness, they validated the distress. They created an environment that told the brain that this behavior was expected. Conversely, when they went to the quiet cave of St. Vitus, the ritual provided the exact psychological closure the peasants needed to believe they were safe. Their minds told their bodies it was safe to stop, so they did. The human mind is a remarkably powerful thing. Under the right amount of pressure, it can completely hijack the body. So the next time you find yourself stuck in an awkward social situation or a stressful week, just remember, history shows us it could be much worse. At least the local government isn't building a stage in your driveway and forcing you to move until you collapse. If you found this look into the mysteries of human psychology fascinating, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and check out our other videos uncovering the bizarre, dark, and incredible secrets of history. Stay safe and watch your step.